The story about bias on the BBC is somewhat interesting. It's a fascinating story because it's really a waste of time, a waste of space. But the person that's made something of this issue is Donald Trump and also the Murdoch press through Sky News. And what I find bewildering, as I do with most of the commentary I hear from Sky, is that they are blaming not only BBC for a bias, but also the ABC for the same issue, for editing a comment or a speech made by Trump on the day of the insurrection on January the 6th. Now, I believe whichever way you look at it, maybe an editor should not have edited it the way they did. I'm not disagreeing with that. Whether, though, that edit changed the tone of the final outcome, which was Donald Trump urging people to go to the Capitol, which was an event which brought about the riot, I think we need to acknowledge a few things. Number one, there were over 1,000 people convicted of the riot, and that every one of them admitted that they were inspired to go there because of Donald Trump's speech. Now, if you take the first bit of that speech and then you edit something he said an hour later and you put it together and it sounds like he's inspiring people to go and riot at the Capitol, well, the actual response should be, yes, that's what he was doing. The man's a moron, and he was encouraging people to overturn an election which he said was stolen. That is what this is all about. But the BBC have decided, for a whole host of other reasons, not just about the edit, but for a whole host of reasons, which is rather complicated, I believe. I'm certainly not going to go in because I don't understand it all fully myself. We're two people at the top of the tree, top of the ladder, top of the BBC resigned. Get all of that, no problems, so be it. It is involved. But the issue I want to discuss really today is the hypocrisy of Sky News for raising this issue. Because, you know, the ABC and the BBC probably, I believe, is one of the best recognised news organisations in the world, because it has over decades expressed a sense of dedication to the journalistic industry and do report what one could argue is fair reporting. Now, the problem that Sky News have with any of that is that if you disagree with the right wing's perspective of anything, then you are seen virtually as a traitor, as someone who is not being an appropriate journalist because you're not siding with them. And because you're not, therefore you are viewed as, how can I best describe it? A left-wing, crazy, inappropriate, stupid, fragmented organisation, such as the ABC, because the ABC doesn't always report things that they like on Sky News. So Sky News journalists, if you could call them that, you can't. I mean, they're just opinion people who pretend to be journalists, but they are on this bandwagon and they are doing all that they can to highlight the fact that not only the BBC have an issue, but so does the ABC for the same reason, which is ridiculous. But that's what they're doing because Sky News reports the news actually as it is. They do not give opinions. They do not distort or provide misinformation or disinformation about anything because they are just so pure. So here's a couple of takes on this. I'm going to start with Sharri Markson's first, and we'll talk about it as we go through this unbelievable characterisation of the BBC.
Okay, let's turn to the BBC saga now. Big news today that Trump is suing the BBC for $1 billion in damages. This after it doctored footage of him from January 6 to make it look like he was inciting the Capitol Hill riot.
Now, the point about Trump suing is that in the UK, there's a limit to how long it takes before you take such actions, and it's 12 months. In the United States, it's 2 years, falls within that category, I think, since the release of the Panorama piece. So in the UK, in the US, and the case would be heard in Florida. Now, it'd be horrifying to think that the BBC gave in to Donald Trump for any amount of money. They just should not do so. They will not be able to try the case in Britain for the reasons I've just given, but they could do it in Florida. And whether the BBC might just say, up you, I'm not going to do anything about this, I'm not even going to challenge it, I'm just going to let it run through the court, you make your decision, and therefore we will not pay anything to you, because it is difficult for a country to enforce another sovereign country to pay the fines of another country, such as the United States, the UK. So who knows what's going to happen in relation to any of this, but boy, are Sky News excited about the possibilities here.
He's also demanding a full retraction and a public apology. For more on this now, let's bring in tonight's panel former Speaker of the House, Bronwyn Bishop, and Bill Shorten's former Chief of Staff, Cameron Milner. Great to see you both as always.
I love this bit because, why do you bring Bronwyn in? It's just it amazes me that she has any form of gig whatsoever. She's probably one of the most irrelevant persons in Australia, but they keep dragging her in as well.
So, Bronwyn, I think this is great that the president is taking on the biased left media, not just with what.
Because there's no, because we must remember that there's no such thing as a biased right-wing media. That in as far as Sky News says, that does not exist. There is no biased right-wing media because they couldn't be biased. No, they just couldn't be.
Words, but with legal action.
Absolutely. But I mean, what worries me is that the ABC and the BBC are so closely linked, always have been. And for the
well, why not? They're government-run organisations to start with and get most of their money from the government. But this bit that she's about to talk about now with regard to Princess Diana, I am so befuddled as to why she's come up with this at all. But she has, so it just goes to demonstrate where Bronwyn's mind is at, and it certainly isn't in the present.
For the BBC, the rot set in with the Panorama program on Princess Diana when she was presented with false information to persuade her to do the interview, and it was covered up for decades, and they knew. And that's when the rot began. It's been followed by a whole sequence of covers up, whether it's people who are pedophiles, whether a whole range of them. And there's just this murky feel. And culturally, if they don't clean up their mess in Britain, you've got the problem that they are, in fact, almost commanded to be the main outlet of news because you pay a tax to pay it. We used to have a tax.
What an absolute load of bullshit. What's she carrying on about? This is like a word salad. You think this word salad's bad? Wait until they interview the next guy, because I reckon that this is a word salad in its most obnoxious form, because it just rants around. It's absolutely, like Bronwyn and like a lot of people they have on Sky News, they say absolutely nothing.
Yeah, Gough Whitlam got rid of that.
One good thing you did at least. Cameron, now even from Australia, we've been able to see just how biased the BBC is, particularly.
I love that. Even from Australia, we're able to see how biased the BBC is. Well, I'll tell you what, Shari, from Australia, we see how biased you are, and we're in Australia.
On issues like Israel, and that was one of the stories that was exposed, and I had. And
that's one of Shari's things, because she's so pro IDF. She agrees that 65,000 people, most of them innocent people, should be killed in Gaza. She sees that as fine. That's okay for Shari, because that's the sort of reporting that she does, and that's the sort of reporter, so-called journalist, that she is.
The journalist behind that story behind this whole
Yeah, aren't I wonderful? Sherry, you're wonderful. You know you're wonderful. You keep telling us how wonderful you are. You're just absolutely wonderful.
expose on the show last night, but it was found that BBC Arabia was spreading Hamas propaganda.
Well, isn't it terrible? And look, the BBC should be so much better. As a public broadcaster, they should be able to tell the truth and tell the truth without fear or favour.
So should Sky News, really, but they don't.
But they're not. They're completely, utterly biased. They're captured of the left. And that's the real problem. And isn't it good? Isn't it good they've finally been caught out and someone's actually going to take them to the courts and potentially cost them dearly? And maybe after that they'll listen. Because goodness knows they haven't listened to the complaints of all the rest of us who say you're biased and not doing the right thing on things like Israel, on ABC or the BBC. So if it takes a Trump lawsuit, well, so be it.
Yeah. Bronwyn, you mentioned the ABC.
What a bunch of word salad crap that was. Absolutely unbelievable. But I'll let you know, it doesn't stop there, because we also have your mate and my mate, Chris Kenny, and Chris has decided that not only the BBC should be liable for whatever it is they've done, but so should the ABC.
UK's taxpayer-funded broadcaster. And incredibly, my latest example of ABC bias comes from an almost identical...
And look, Chris, I want you to know, I produce Sky News bias every day almost. So, you know, you're not going to get through this unscathed, buddy, because you're about as biased as they come.
Act of deception involving editing of the very same Donald Trump speech and presented in the same way to fit him up for the January the 6th Capitol Hill riot in Washington in 2021. But what I will also show you is a contrast in accountability. Despite repeated examples of bias and manipulation at the ABC, the news boss, Justin Stevens, just got a $110,000 pay rise. But at the BBC, there has been accountability. It might have taken a series of breaches over a long period, but eventually a price has been paid.
So, not going to bore you with all that stuff, but he produces the same crap that they did for the Panorama program on BBC. Now, my point is, the end result was the same. Anybody who listened to Trump's hour-long rant prior to the riot would be, anybody with a reasonable set of brain power would at least understand, I guess, that he was inciting not just a riot, but also, as it turned out, his vice president should perhaps, well, as many said, be executed. But that's Trump. Let's make as many excuses for the man as we can. And let's support him where possible, even if he's trying to extort $1 billion from the BBC. Let's do what we can to at least tell people that we're pure, that there's nothing about Sky News which demonstrates any form of bias, even though the whole network, being a Murdoch network, is about being biased. Let me know what you think about all of that in the comment section below. I hope the situation around BBC blows over real quick, because I think at the end of the day, there are probably more important things that we could be talking about. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Take care.